I think your comments about, Elon, let's say, as a globalist force that isn't exactly akin to the previous globalist force is like, well, maybe we've tried to distinguish this technically in our discussions at ARC. Okay, so here's some principles. You tell me what you think about them. Policy that requires force and fear is indicative of, it's at least suboptimal and it's probably tyrannical. So that one of the ways you determine whether a policy is acceptable is whether or not it's invitational, right? And so it'd be like, I make you an offer and hopefully you're on board voluntarily, which would make you a much more efficient participant as well. And even if you're not fully enthusiastic about it, you can't think of a better alternative that you would lay claim to, right? So it's like, you can imagine if we're going to negotiate reasonably, we might say, well, we're going to be duty bound to accept the best offer we can conceive of, right? I mean, hopefully it'll be one that also fills you with enthusiasm, but in the absence of that, at least you won't be able to think of a better alternative. So no power, no force, no fear, right? And then the other thing that we've toyed with, let's say, or played with is the idea that not only does the vision of the future have to be invitational, there has to be an element of play about it. Because I studied play fairly deeply neurophysiologically, and play is a really interesting motivational state because it's very fragile. It can be disrupted by almost any other motivational state. So the sense of play, which is like direction with variability, right? Because that's play, is direction with variability. That only emerges when the situation, say, of communication and cooperation has been optimized. So then you might say another way that you can tell if the venture is proceeding well is that if everybody engaged in it can engage in a sense of play. And I like the play idea, partly because it's voluntary, obviously, but also because play implies a fair bit of tolerance for deviation along the pathway.
Yes,
right?
for vicissitude. Now, I'm assuming that your experience as a clinical psychologist must be primarily interpersonal, although you will ultimately be dealing with large data sets. But the reason I'm fascinated that you bring up play so early in our conversation is because when precisely looking at the posts of Elon Musk and Trump, with Trump saying, make Canada the 51st state, or we're going to reach all the way down to Panama, or we're having Greenland, or Elon Musk's sort of puckish pugnaciousness in dealing with his detractors on his own platform doesn't have that kind of haughtiness and piety that we remember, that kind of Pharisee-like certainty of the materialist, rationalist, neoliberal oligarchs who appear now to be being displaced. This play, though, I wonder, Jordan, and this is not an assertion that I'm making with regard to the previous listed individuals. I know our audience when it comes to Trump and Musk and stuff, but isn't there mischief and play in the demonic also? Now, like the reason I like play, one, I'm a comedian. I enjoy liminal spaces, and I enjoy the uncertainty that's a prerequisite of play. The true spirit of pioneering discovery that is encompassed within play and I enjoy actually. In fact, perhaps much of the Trump phenomena was this politician isn't talking like other politicians. Way back 2015 with Hillary Clinton, because you'd be in jail. That moment, it's like, people don't say that. Like then up against the sort of school mom sort of bluster and haughtiness of you can't. The sort of the English have bequeathed to the world abundantly that kind of sort of Victorian certainty. Glance thee not at the piano leg in case you feel a tumescent stirring in the loins. Total lack of joy and play. Now, isn't it interesting to see that tool of play wielded now by the truly powerful, by Trump and Musk? It'll be interesting because, their detractors continue. You might see a late night talk show host saying, see, I told you, they're going to take over Canada. What's Elon Musk doing meddling in British politics? But regardless of again, as a Christian, regardless of the individual, Trump's not God, Musk's not God. They're all human beings that are going to come and go. And perhaps, I've been thinking this about Elon Musk somewhat lately. Is there a point where order of magnitude alters essence, i.e., is not Musk just a reiteration of Murdoch? Because, Tony Blair used to kowtow, bend the knee, go on holiday to ensure that Murdoch would support his new Labour movement. It was understood that Thatcher required Murdoch. It was understood that if Murdoch unleashed an ocean of ink against an opposition party, the government would remain in power. Now, Murdoch, he still has some power across the Anglophonic world, and I don't know what Murdoch's power is like now, but what I know is that Elon Musk is like a version of a media magnate, at least when it comes to the social media aspect of his vast enterprises. But when it becomes not a 20-minute perusal of some rag, but an ever-present mirror reflecting back an ongoing conversation, the ability to maneuver and censor that, as well as the manner in which he's conducting that conversation, again, not the sort of what would appear to be, and perhaps I'm being naive, the economically led kind of, I imagine, Dow Jones watching sort of traditional entrenched mentality of Digger, for that was the nickname, wasn't it, of Murdoch. You now see this sort of, perhaps again it's the technology that leads, because the technology now, diffuse cybernetics, instantaneous systems taking place in the present. Because our systems for understanding God were mechanical in the industrial age. They were agricultural at the advent of that significant seismic shift in our kind's Weltanschauung. So now that we have this instantaneous, omnipresent potentiality, maybe everything's changing. So in short, what I'm saying is what's happening now entirely unique because it is temporal, because of the temporal component, because of this instantaneous, immersive ability to alter conversation. Maybe it no longer is even paradigmatically the same, Jordan.
I just did an interview with Pierre Poilievre, who's going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada in all likelihood, and he chose to speak with me in depth instead of talking to the legacy media, let's say. And it was actually rather comical from my perspective, because all the legacy media outlets in Canada had to play catch up, which I contemplated with some degree of, inappropriate satisfaction. But there's something, so we had to talk about that, because Poilievre had expressed some doubts about his performance in the discussion. He said there were many topics he didn't get to. And so we talked about that. And I said, well, the long form podcast format can't be manipulated a priori successfully, because if you come to the podcast with a set of talking points and you stick to your script, you're going to get, first of all, no one will watch you. And I've seen this with political figures. This isn't a guess. I know this is the case. No one will watch you and all the comments will be negative. You have to come there knowing where you stand, but ready to follow the thread of the conversation wherever it goes. And to do that, you have to sacrifice the pre-planning.
Did you know that multiple companies are keeping a living profile of everything that you do online? These data brokers are making billions selling your private information to big tech companies, advertisers, and even our own government. It's concerning just how many people have given up on their privacy rights, but now you can take back control of yours by using ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN reroutes all your internet activity through encrypted servers, meaning no one can see or track what you do online. It hides your IP address so data brokers can't build a profile on you, and you can browse the internet as if you're in any of 105 different countries. Both our hosts and production teams here at the Daily Wire use ExpressVPN to reroute all their activity through secure, encrypted servers and hide their IP addresses. That means no one can track them or build profiles on their behavior. ExpressVPN is also incredibly user-friendly. One tap to connect and it works across all devices, your phone, tablet, TV, desktop, protecting up to 8 devices at the same time. Your entire family can stay protected without any hassle. And right now you can get an extra 4 months free when you use our special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Jordan and get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Jordan today.
Okay, so then we might look into that more deeply and we might say, well, now that video is predominating, let's say, over the written word, that means that might mean the reemergence of something like spontaneity over propaganda. Like, that could be the case, because the new media forms do prioritize spontaneity instead of preparation. Now, you can see that as a technological shift. Back when bandwidth was staggeringly expensive and every second on broadcast media cost a fortune, you could imagine that risk minimization was the name of the game and that every second had to be controlled. But that restriction is no longer present, even at all. And so what that might mean, and that's what you're referring to, is that an entirely new form of political discourse might emerge, and that people who are capable of generating a certain degree of perspicacity and wisdom spontaneously are going to be prioritized over those who have a bent towards incentivized or instrumental manipulation. I mean, Polyev could do that, right? He had a conversation with me. He got no questions ahead of time, none. And he was willing to go along with that. But it is really a completely different way of. Now, we've been talking to Democrats too, trying to get them on the podcast circuit. And the resistance so far has been the utter inability and unwillingness of people on the Democrat side to forego their pre-planned agenda with regards to a conversation.